Welcome back, everybody, to another fantastic episode of I'm Gonna Talk and You're Gonna Listen. Um, Thanks, first of all, to all my coffee supporters. I probably did like 3 or 4 like homestead updates before I finally settled on one, and there ended up being no audio for half of it. The storms have been just crazy. And similarly to with the podcasts, like I've been doing the podcasts live and then just not posting them. I don't know why. I've been talking myself out of it, or just overthinking it really. So I promise I'll post this one. And I don't have part of it is I really, like, objectively don't have a lot of updates kind of on like the greater state of the situation of the area, right? Homeless population's gotten worse. It's getting cold, which makes it more dangerous for them. The cities are saying that they're out of money to provide them heat, but I don't know how that's possible when they're millions and tens of millions over budget. They can't account for that money. They're redoing the structure of their leadership to the tunes of like 20s of millions of dollars a year. And by all accounts, anybody who can do basic math would know that they've got just tens and tens of millions of dollars in tax overages, and yet they continue to raise taxes and they continue to say that they don't have money for anybody in what has been lovingly coined as the homeless industrial complex. No doubt somebody's got a friend or a lobbyist or somebody on the inside, or probably multiple, that is making a fortune off of this homeless problem. That is really tragic. There is a lot of at-risk, vulnerable people that should not be out there. That should absolutely have a safe place. And then there's others that are just monsters, or they're just blitzed out of their mind. And the biggest problem is they don't have what are kind of called like sobering stations, where you could put them in somewhere and then they get sobered up, and then you could try to figure out either what kind of help they need or if they're just too far gone. And there's no good answer for what to do with the ones that are too far gone now, but there isn't safe housing for the ones that need safe housing. Trafficking is still going up. Carjackings are going up again. As many as like 4 street racer lockdowns simultaneously over the weekend. The cities just aren't safe. And if they don't have the resources to deal with it, certainly nobody else does. The border's still open, which means there's these migrant towns popping up in every city that are very expensive. They want the churches to fix. It's like the churches don't have enough resources to fix that. That's not what they're designed for. A church can't support like a small migrant city. Then they go, well, you're just not a Christian then. I don't know. And amongst all that, the commercial real estate is still going unfilled and unbuilt. There's another big commercial building that just, like, I can't remember which one it was, but like it just stalled out the other day and they stopped working on it, and the workers hadn't gotten paid. And apparently, like, in this contract, if it stops, if the building stops for any point of time, they can either opt to switch to another builder that'll pay their employees, or they could just like strip the place down and use it for parts. This like building that's, I don't know, halfway done. So we're as a society, we're entering that phase that I've been talking about for a long time, where commercial real estate's going to crash. And the question is, well, what do you do when commercial real estate crashes? Well, they're still going to be denying it and trying to sweep it under the rug until the election cycle. But in the meantime, they're still going to keep trying to force everybody back in the office to make the city vibrant again. But really, all they want is for us all to go down there and spend our money, which I refuse to do. Much like the ads, you know, I won't, if I see an ad for something on the internet, I'll automatically, I won't buy it, even if it's something I need or want. I'm going to buy the things that I need or want, and I won't support the ad structure. They're just wasting their money. And it's the same way of going in the office. I won't spend my money in the city, period. I won't. And so me going down there is useless. On top of that, the pro-Palestine protests are growing in size and turning into an every other day thing. And everyone's just kind of ignoring it. And there was somewhere in the realm of 10,000 to 100,000 protesters in DC yesterday, and they got all the way up to the big house and started trying to shake the gate down. By all accounts, is certainly what it appeared to look like, and assaulting Secret Service agents and stuff, and nobody did anything about it. They just kind of sat there and I guess hoped that the gates held. And this should not be ignored, because their new banner that they're marching under is going to be anti-war and anti-racism simultaneously. And this is how they recruit and get more people to bolster their numbers. They're going to keep these non-violent for as long as possible to recruit as many people as possible before they switch over. It's what they always do. And yes, the freedom of speech is protected on the First Amendment. And they'll use the First Amendment as a shield for as long as they can before they get critical mass, and then they won't need that umbrella anymore. And by then, the cops and the cities will be too burdened to be able to do anything about it. And there'll be more chazzes, and the whole cycle will repeat itself. Meanwhile, this whole time, they've been the folks pushing these narratives and pushing for these giant movements have been getting more money than ever. Or they've just been looting and stealing this whole entire time to be able to fund their operations. And since the last one, there's a whole new generation that's already been born that they can backfill their numbers with as child soldiers in the cities. Not to mention, are very adept at stealing vehicles now. Smash and grabs, sometimes 2 or 3 smash and grabs per night, sometimes 4 to 6 armed people robbing stores every night in every major city. And we are looking at what is going to be the biggest batch of civil unrest that the U.S. has ever seen. well, besides the last, besides, I don't know, outside of war times, there, we'll put it that way. So they used to have like sort of like a mobile gun stores last time, where they would traffic in stolen guns. They have 10 times that now. They've got just duffel bags full of like full auto Glocks, basically, with extended mags, and like 30 round mags and drum mags. And all they've done, at least in the Pacific Northwest, and then in a couple of other states, is tried like hell to disarm us. And I could argue that the gangs are just trying to protect themselves and trying to protect their property and try to protect their schools. And certainly, you haven't heard of any gang schools getting shot up or attacked. Well, they're carrying duffel bags full of full auto Glocks. I don't think anyone is going to attack their school. That's for damn sure. So they could very easily maintain the moral high ground simply by trying to protect their areas, as long as they don't go out and attack anybody else. Well, they're way, way, way ahead of the curve. The more you practice and train, the more likely you are to run out of ammo. And I would say that we're entering territory where we don't know if or when ammo is going to run out. A lot of the firearms and ammo are going to now 2 proxy wars. And that usually spells ammo drying out for us. Us being the free citizens of the United States. So it sounds cliche. It's like, well, what do you do about it? And it's like, well, nothing's changed. You still try to grow your own food, work on your radios, work on your gardens, secure your homestead, secure your neighborhood, get a bug out plan. But we're closer than we've ever been. Basically, 2020 was just a warm-up. 2016 was just a warm-up. Next year is going to be the perfect storm. The anti-war crowd, the pro-Palestinian crowd, and every other crowd that you can think of, on top of it being an election year. All the climate change folks, every single group, all the union shenanigans going on, with the unprecedented 30 to 35% bonus that or whatever you want to call it, pricing, but I'm calling it a bonus. The increase that they got, unprecedented. Nobody anywhere just sits there not doing anything extra and suddenly gets 35% or 35% more money or whatever. It's insane. And then you have the government shutdown that could happen within about 15 days. I'm sorry, 10 days. And that probably won't happen. I don't believe it'll happen. But what it'll do is it'll push us further and further, just impossibly in debt. So, going back to what you can do, this is the winter time, but you can still work on practicing germinating your seeds, which is what I've been doing. And I've gotten pretty good at germinating seeds. And then you can start a little greenhouse and start collecting dirt and start collecting little plastic containers around the house. And if you have potatoes, or if you find potatoes on sale, you can start getting your potatoes ready to seed. there's just so much you can do. Like, food has tripled, fuel's tripled, the price of a vehicle's tripled, like, and even 35%, even though I said that's unprecedented, like, that's still nothing. If they haven't gotten any raises in 5 years, that's only like 5% a year, which is not that, it's okay, but it's not great. You know, I read something that said like 300,000 a year is like the new 100,000 a year. And I know they'd said that for Seattle, but they've started saying that for other places too. So yeah, I guess, I don't know. I think the other information that I was trying to get out last time that I kept jumbling and bumbling over is all of like the prepper / homesteader misinformation out there. Most of the videos on T-post removal was wrong. I took a T-post out of the ground yesterday that was bent at a 45-degree angle with barely any effort at all with a T-post puller. I just made sure it was perpendicular and got perfectly behind it since I could, thankfully, and it came right out. You only take a T-post from the side as a last resort, and you have to be insanely careful. But if you're perfectly parallel with one, push it forward, like a degree, which kind of balances it out. You can pull T-posts right out with the T-post puller. Worst case, run a little water from a garden hose down there if it hasn't been raining in a long time. And you'll never hurt yourself. You'll never do what I did, which is try to take a T-post from the side, and then it jets you forward and then lands you into a pile of T-posts. Don't do that. If you're doing T-post pulling right, it's actually very, very, very safe, very easy. The next thing, angle grinding. The sparks should be going down. You should have the guard rotated to where the guard is going to be protecting your face. So the spark should be going down. The guard should be facing you. And your face and body should be offline with where the blade is. And you should be wearing a face shield, goggles, long sleeves, long pants, boots. And you're going to want to be cognizant to make sure you don't catch yourself on fire. But I noticed most of the time that I would have gotten hurt, it was from the things that I was, oh man, my throat, excuse me. It was the thing, I was using an angle grinder to cut, so I was using a cutting disc, and the items that I was cutting would fall, and obviously if I wasn't careful, they would have fallen on my foot and hurt really bad. So I should have been wearing steel toes the whole time, but I'd forgotten that that's really what I was trying to protect myself from. And it doesn't offer you hardly any protection on the sides of your feet where they're really tender, but it does somewhat protect you. The next thing is check your cutting discs often. Make sure they're not getting crappy. Buy a big pack of reliable cutting discs. That way you don't feel bad if one gets crapped up and you just have to throw it away. Cutting discs can get really sketchy really fast, and that's how they disintegrate. And always cut slow. Let the cutting disc do the work. Don't try to push into it. If you feel it skipping, you're going to need to stabilize it somehow. And that's kind of all I have to say about that. I don't have any videos of it because there's no videos of, or there's no safe way to like angle grind and record it without either someone recording it, which isn't really safe for them, or having a really nice tripod and stuff, which I don't have that kind of setup. So, oh well. Last but not least, the other thing that I've managed to debunk is that whole wipes aren't safe in septic systems, or wipes aren't safe in RV systems. Some wipes are and some wipes aren't. And what you do is put a wipe in a jar, a clean one, fill it full of whatever water it is that you have that you're using at your location, and check it every couple days. If it disintegrates in a couple days all by itself and turns into a cloud, you are fine. If it doesn't turn into a cloud, you're not fine, and it will gunk your system up. And so I'm practicing my second wipe now. So I practiced the Walmart brand wipes, and it took about 3 weeks, and it turned into a cloud. I'm practicing a Costco wipe now, and it has made it a week, and it's not doing anything. So I estimate and I pick it up and swish it around every couple days, just because fair is fair. I think I ripped a couple of teeny tiny tears in the Walmart one, and I can't tell if that really made a difference or not. But it stands to reason that they're cutting up with like little tears in the towels. I didn't do any tears in this one. I think if it's making it tomorrow, if the wipe, I know it sounds so weird, but it's important, because if you're a prepper and you clog up your septic system, then you're in a world of hurt. Or if you're trying to bug out an RV and you clog up your RV system. So they'll say they can flush, and they can. They can all flush. But how long they take to disintegrate is a completely other can of worms. So if you use the Costco wipes, I would say don't plan on those disintegrating anytime soon, and you could have a real problem. The Walmart ones, I would say just be really careful. Really, really, really careful, and monitor it. And if you have 4 people using your septic system and they're all using wipes, you look at that wipe in the jar and go, it takes 3 weeks to turn into a cloud. You could have a real problem. I haven't tried Scott and Cottonelle. Supposedly those are the 2 best ones. So I'll try those next. Wipes are obviously really important in shit hits the fan scenarios. But a lot of people tell you to not use them. And the problem is I haven't seen a single legitimate YouTube video that I can absolutely prove with a shadow of a doubt was a septic system caused by flushable wipes. I could debunk every single one of them, and anybody with 2 brain cells to rub together can debunk every single one of them. So, and all the sciencey fancy pants ones, only one video did any good at really explaining how to like recreate the actual use case. And unfortunately, they had the comments shut off. So, I suspect it's because there was a kid in the video, and they probably wanted to keep it kid friendly, and the only way to do that, to kind of promote kids doing science and stuff, was to probably shut the comments off. But that's the only one that seemed to have got it right, and so I'm kind of like recreating it. I don't have like hard, fast written down like statistics on it or anything, but I'm eyeballing it. And what I learned even with just the Walmart one was enough for me to not want to use Walmart's in a septic system. Certainly not an RV system. More than 1 or 2 in an emergency. Yeah, and then the verdict's out on Scott and Cottonelle. I haven't seen any of those in stores in a long time, but if I do, I'll buy a pack and I'll test those. But yeah, so I suggest, I know that's kind of like a really gross subject, but it's another one of those things where online they are way off. There's so much prepping, homesteading, misinfo, disinfo out there that it's just insane. And so with just a little bit of like planning and preparation, you can at least test things yourself. And it's the same thing with water. So here at the homestead, I end up testing a lot of things because I don't trust people. And so the next one's water. Water costs a lot if you have to get it in. And so water at the store ends up being like over $2 for 5 gallons. And a friend is letting me get the water from his church, which is really nice. So every 2 weeks I go fill up all my water at his church. The problem is that the cities all have like, well, not all the cities, but some of the cities have chlorinated water. You can drink chlorinated water. The internet will tell you that you can't, but you can. But a couple things happen. It ends up feeling after a little while like you're just drinking straight salt. And supposedly it kills all like the good bugs in your gut too. And so the long-term impacts I think are not good. You can filter it out pretty easily with one of those charcoal water filters that you just get at, the big box stores. But what they don't tell you, unless you look really close, is each one of those can only do like 40 gallons. Well, if you're shipping in water in 5-gallon buckets, you've got to do the math. You're not doing a lot of water with one of those. The price adds up. And so boiling the water is not really feasible either unless you've got a huge like 5-gallon like pot, one of those giant pots. But you've got to actually boil the water for a long time, which takes a lot of energy. And you're still left off with like the byproducts. It doesn't completely boil. So unless you plan on making a still, you have to figure out if your charcoal filters, if you can get those at a cheaper price, than trying to buy the filtered water. And a lot of the stores, you think you can go buy water at them, but they're just like water exchanges. Which means you go leave your jugs and go pick up new jugs. So what we found online is there's a lot of people who have found like free faucets up in the mountains. If you've ever been up in the mountains and you've seen just like a faucet that's like randomly running water for no reason, just constantly, what we found is that people take their pickup trucks up there, and sometimes there'll be like 2-3 trucks, and they've got like systems where they just hook up the hoses and they just run the hoses to each bucket and they go up there and fill their water up. That is, of course, unless you can find a homestead nearby that has a well with fresh water that doesn't have any metals in it. But what we've noticed is like not everybody's in a giant hurry to share their water, even though they can. I think they just don't want the risk of somebody they don't 100% trust coming on their property and grabbing water whenever they want. So I would so we've been learning a lot about water. I don't know what else. Invest in power tools now while you can, if you can, while there's any power tools left. Invest in screws and stuff. I've started working on like heat shrink tubing, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. But you're gonna have to be like really self-reliant, and for a long time I was buying tools just like so the tool would like last long enough for me to do a couple projects, but I've been taking a look a lot more like on brushless, switching over to like brushless systems, even though it's maybe 20-30% more expensive, because I would know like if I have to start building like tiny homes, I know my tools will kind of be built for that extra amount of work. And I'm a dodo though. In my last drill accidentally like wasn't a brushless because I wasn't thinking. But if you're buying a tool and you can afford the extra like 20%, and if it's a tool that you would use, that's weird. Some gal just drove by pointing. Anyway, if you can afford brushless tools and it's something that you would need to like build a homestead, I would consider spending the extra 20% and getting the brushless tool. So I don't really know what else to say. I think probably the last thing is like modern home defense tools. The firearms, mag, stock, trigger bans are all getting worse and worse and worse. They're trying to disarm everybody conveniently in time for, by all accounts, what could be the biggest civil unrest we've ever had. So it behooves you, as we're going into these election cycles, to be aware of what laws are passing, what kind of emergency clauses can go through, and how fast they want everything registered, like they tried to do with the SBRs. And now in some states they're trying to do with just most modern weapons in general, to where you can become a felon overnight with stuff you already own and purchase legally and use legally. So pay attention to that and have a plan. The other thing, before I close this out, is don't forget to rotate your food. Don't forget to rotate your pet's food. Pet food does not last that long. Your own food, canned food, people will say you can use it up to 10 years, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't trust that. I would still plan on rotating it out and then finding a church to donate it to. If you can't rotate it out, like if your diet changed or if whoever you were prepping that specific food for is not around anymore. And that way you can replenish your stocks. If you're like switching between like canned food and freeze-dried food, you know, keep some, 5-year stock, which is like your cans, and then keep some like 25-year stock, which is your freeze-dried, and alternate between those. And especially now with homeless and migrants, immigrants, illegals, whatever you want to call them, or whatever they are, or just, it depends. They could all be, anyway, blah, blah, blah. The point is like, you could still be helping your community out by donating the food that you're not cycling through. So that's what we're going to be doing. That's what I suggest you do. Don't let your food go to waste. Don't let it get ruined. And yeah, that's really all I can think of. Trying to cram a lot of stuff in, try not to be negative. Yeah, I'm still writing Ghost Company 2. I'd say it's about 2/3 done. It's really hitting its rhythm, but I've got a lot going on to where I haven't been able to focus on it. Every time the weather's not raining, like right now, I'm usually like outside working on stuff. But I really wanted to get this video out because I have not posted like the last 3 or 4 podcasts, and I didn't post like the last 3 or 4 homestead updates, and that's not good for retention, but it's also doesn't help anybody. In case this does help somebody, I don't know. Things are definitely there's I always do like the what if I'm wrong segment, there's no way out of this. Like, forcing us back into the cities isn't going to rejuvenate the cities. The civil unrest is already over and above and beyond. Like, 911 is taxed. They have like AIs answering 911 now. They can only answer like if like violent crimes are in progress, and even half the time you get put on a busy signal. So you have to plan and prepare and guard your preps and begin to network so you can get your preps and yourself out of the city, and plan on getting out of the city, and work on those networks and make sure they're people you can trust. And not even counting 15-minute cities, not even counting like digital currency. All of that's coming too. Not counting everyone switching over to EVs and then them spontaneously combusting, or the massive cyber threats to our grid, and the sun just like barfing out whatever it does that just fries all of our wireless all the time now. Happened again last night. Wireless just like went to shit for no reason for a good couple hours. There wasn't even a storm going on, but it could have been like a solar storm. So you've got to be prepared. It seems like a really bad time to buy a house right now. And this isn't financial advice. Like, the interest rates, while the interest rates have stabilized, like house interest rates seem like they're still going up. And so keep in mind, like, if a house is obtainable for you right now, it might not be obtainable for you in 3 to 6 months. And that's not like FOMO, fear of missing out. That's just like math. Like, it's very deceptive, because house interest rates are going up, and I think it's not as obvious because the Fed's holding on to the overall interest rate. They're still trying to curb inflation like crazy. They keep saying there's more jobs, but everyone's working 3 jobs now. So if you can afford it now, and you need it, and you know you need to get out, you should strongly consider going for it. And if the interest rates crash, you can always refinance. But it's possible that a lot of these super groups that were buying up housing, it's possible that a lot of them are taking a break because they have what they need. There was a group in Silicon Valley that bought up enough acreage to make a city, and they're saying that they're actually stopping because they have the land that they need. So this could be a good time. I know several other folks that have all bought houses recently, not just us, and they don't regret it. Obviously you got to make sure you have like stable jobs and stuff, but like, I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows what's going to constitute an AI proof job, because the Hollywood Writing Guild still hasn't sorted a lot of that out yet. And it sounded like what they were hung up on is actors not wanting the companies to use their AI likeness without their permission. I thought that was already a rule. I assumed everyone's faces were copywritten and that would be a part of your contract, but I don't know. So I don't know what an AI proof job is. Certainly the landscape is dramatically changing, and unless they make an AI that can protect all of our computers like Skynet, cybersecurity might be something to get into, because cyber threats are just getting worse. Other than that, I don't know. There's going to be computers building vehicles. There's going to be, ever since I was a kid, I remember gardening, thinking to myself, someday robots could like replace me, working in the garden. This is when I was a kid. But I was like, there will always need to be somebody that comes by and repairs the computer, or repairs the robot that's gardening. And so I used to think, it'll get rid of the low income jobs, but it'll maintain like the medium. I don't know. I don't know what to do about job security. I don't think necessarily my job is any more secure than anybody else's, because even though I kind of hedged in the right direction, I also know that like the landscape can just change. Priorities can just change. And they could just decide. We were talking about this yesterday because we got to get our car fixed, and it's like they could just decide to stop repairing the roads. And then what's everybody supposed to do? Like, everyone's cars are going to get destroyed if they just decide to stop repairing the roads. But all of the car repair fixie places will be changing brakes like crazy and changing all like the calipers and stuff, because they're just going to get warped and destroyed from everybody smashing into potholes. So the people in charge of fixing potholes could all lose their jobs, but the people that repair cars' brake systems and I don't know, all the other car mumbo jumbo stuff that gets thrashed every time a car smashes a pothole at 60 miles an hour, like, there's still going to be jobs out there. And so the AI is not going to be able to fix old cars. So I don't know. The car repair place is like months and months backed up. The doctor's offices, I know they're months and months backed up too, but they're on strike right now for more money also, and they can be replaced by the National Guard in 2 seconds. So I don't know. Cooks, we don't have computers that can like cook things yet, but I know that's pretty volatile. So even though like a lot of gig work is going to go away, like Uber drivers and Uber Eats and all that, there's still going to have to be grocery store distribution centers. Like, computers driving trucks is still years away. I think there's a lot of good ways to make money, and I still think there's a lot of good ways to hedge against this. You just have to be smart. You have to kind of really think hard about what you want to do and about how you want to get there. And you got to have a team member or two that are willing to all work towards the same goal. And then you can do it. So don't give up. Yeah, don't give up. Don't let people tell you that you're stupid. Maybe you're the only smart person if everybody's telling you that you're stupid. So you never know, but you got to be able to take criticism and think critically, because the think tanks that are putting all this together have infinite resources and infinite power. So we have to constantly be thinking and trying to figure out ways through this. There's still loggers. There's still log truck drivers. There's still people working at sawmills. There's still people working at building houses, which means there's still electricians. There's still plumbers, right? And framers and windowers. And sure, houses could dry up and they could stop making all those, but I don't know. You gotta just keep thinking, keep trying to work through this. Don't give up. Don't do what so many people are doing right now and just give up. Because if we can't take care of the homeless and we can't take care of just the massive immigration going on, or whatever you want to call it, it is a literal like migration. If we can't take care of that, we sure as hell can't like subsidize Social Security, disability, and unemployment. I mean, the whole thing's going to collapse. So you have to be able to figure this out somehow. Anyway, what else? I think what I'm going to do is bundle a bunch of different things together in this podcast. So now that the kind of the normal parts of the podcast are over, I want to do like some community highlights. So the first one is Broken Roads is coming out in just a few days, and I love narrative, story-driven, like strategy RPG games, especially from very, very, very small developers that are kind of doing their own thing. So Broken Roads, they won't say this, but I don't care. I'm going to say it. It's kind of like the spiritual successor to Shadowrun Returns and Dead State, where it's like apocalypse, but you're in Australia, and so where it's kind of always like the apocalypse. So even this is going to be like even more like the apocalypse. I've played the demo, and yeah, sure enough, it plays a lot. And I don't know, like I thought I was playing Dead State. It was like a mod, feels like a mod for Dead State. But it's coming out here actually in just 8 days, which I'm super, super, super excited about. I don't know what the price is going to be, but y'all will see me. I'll throw some footage of this up on the channel. I only buy like one newish game like a year now, because I got burned on. I've gotten burned on buying games too many times, but I suspect this game is going to be somewhat affordable. I don't think I've met. I don't know. For some weird reason, I feel like I've met these guys, but that doesn't seem right. I don't know how I could have met them, but it feels like I have. Anyway, this is kind of like my first. So if you're into pointy, clicky strategy RPGs, check this out. It comes out in a few days. Broken Roads by Drop Bear Bites. And I'm going to be playing every inch of this thing, because I could have played Shadowrun Returns and Dead State forever. I think Shadowrun Returns, I think I played through every single campaign at least 3 times. In Dead State, I probably played through the bulk of it at least like 5, 6, 7 times. So this is bar none like my favorite genre, my favorite kind of a method of digesting information, turn-based strategy, because it gives me time to think and stuff. And there's been a lot of other really good strategy turn-based RPGs out that I just haven't had time, or they've just been way too expensive. So I'm hoping this one's somewhat affordable. We'll see. I'm hoping. I'll hope in one hand. And yeah, blah blah blah. All right, next community showcase update thing. This is going to be kind of a different. This is going to be something probably a little different. Y'all aren't used to, but this community showcase thingamabob is from a horror gore artist I ran into on Gab. And you know, I like to support other indie just creators in general, and bumped into this one. It's Melissa Acosta Art, or melissaacostaart.com/shop, and it is like a horror gore stuff, but it is Halloween time, and the other thing I wanted to point out about this is that while this stuff seems kind of maybe shocking at first, I wanted to talk about it a little bit, because as I was messaging them, I'm like, well, yeah, this is like horror and gore and stuff, but it's not really the end of the world. And I'll pop their website up in a second. It's not really the end of the world, because I was a webcomic artist for over 5 years, and I've seen every type of horror and gore and shock and self-harm and every kind of like art that anyone's twisted mind can like think up. I mean, just things still to this day that like I can't unsee. And so I don't think anybody that would watch this probably by now has like a sensitive stomach, or that there would be like sensitive ears watching, but I still wanted to cover this anyway, and I'll talk about it a little bit. And so yeah, here's their website, melissaacostaart.com, and I was talking to them back and forth. They are on Gab. They haven't posted how they got into this yet, but I was trying to explain to them that like this isn't that bad. In fact, as like gore, as far as like gore goes, this is like really, really, really on the tame side. I think also, I'm not quite sure, but I think the idea is that these are supposed to be t-shirts or prints or something. I'm not exactly sure. But at first, let's see how this. At first, I thought this was supposed to be like a guy with like stumps for arms, but then I realized his those are just his hands bloody, and then I realized his eyes were gouged out. But as they assume what the Victoria's Malavix was it used to be heterosexual before she started to hate sex itself. Now she's in. Oh yeah, see, so yeah, it's interesting. It like reminds me. It just reminds me of like the old webcomic art of yore, before webcomics got woke and went away and died because one side had income and the other side didn't. So this stuff looks like horrible, maybe at first, if you've never seen it. Horrible meaning like gore, but in terms of webcomics, this was pretty tame. I've seen a lot of shit. The I think it was because there was like no rules like when webcomics first came out, and nobody had really decided what to think or do about it. So like once you had gone down the rabbit hole just like went as far as you could imagine. And so I don't know if this person's anti-woke or pro-woke or this or that or the other, but this doesn't seem self-harm-y at all. If it had been self-harm-y, then I wouldn't have promoted it, because I think that I think that gets into really dangerous territory, as it did on DeviantArt many times back in the day. See what, and the other the other thing about this art, which I find interesting, is that it could be like interpreted different ways. And so even though she writes her own thing right here, I was inspired by the phrase "take it to heart" for this piece, because this is a literal take on the phrase. By the way, those are nails piercing the woman's heart, and that is her rib cage poking out, so it looks like teeth. Well, yeah, that's one way of looking at it, but the first time I looked at it, I'm like, oh, that's like it looks like an alien, like, bursting out of their chest, almost, or something. I don't know. I think that art can be interesting when it looks like something else at first, and then you look at it more and it takes on like multiple meanings and stuff. And there's definitely a part of me, a big part of me, that really misses like the early to mid 2000s. I wanted webcomic art to take off like so bad, and I don't know, like that ship sailed, and there was no way for those people to stay together. Like, just a giant wedge was driven into it. And I'm not going to pretend that like webcomics are ever going to come back, because they're not, and probably only like 0.01% of them were able to really make any long lasting, or the transition into political cartoons, which is what a lot of them did. But I encourage Melissa here to keep going, and you might not sell anything, but people will read your stories. Like, this is very webcomic-y, and people will read your stories, and they will, yeah, that's, I don't know, I'm having a hard time like trying to kind of like articulate what I'm trying to say, but like that was kind of the whole point of like DeviantArt way back when, is someone would post the piece of art, and then they would post like the story next to it, and then people would associate the art with the story, and then that's how webcomics just naturally took off. Is people were able to tell their own stories in their own art as it was convenient to them. And through that, everybody got to express themselves either in healthy ways, or they were able to reach out to people in like safe environments. And so if somebody was posting about self-harm, then you could say like, hey, do you need help? You know, or, you know, you may be in a small town, but, you know, things aren't like that everywhere. Or if your parents are being jerks, like, the whole world's not that way. Because the alternative is that they run out and they end up being homeless, and they end up being trafficked, and it's a terrible situation. So I feel like, at least, it was a way of people expressing themselves before things got the way they are now, where everything is so like hyper emotional and hyper driven to the point to where things always end up in horrible outcomes, and they don't need to. And so I think if you, not that you have to support anything that you don't want to, but at the same time, if you can put it into like historical context, a lot of people put like the old great horror movies up on a pedestal, but you have to take time to understand like the artist and the meaning behind the art also. And I feel like with webcomic art, that's going to get lost, because I lost contact with every single webcomic artist that I knew. And then the other half of them just like, I don't know. It got weird. So anyway, I thought I would bring that up. And this is like a really good, what's the word? Excuse to talk about it, I guess, and put it into context. I feel like whenever you can put either like scary things or distressing things or things you don't immediately understand, or things that immediately repulse you, as soon as you can put those things into context, they don't like run away from you anymore. Because I think what I'm trying to say is, like, if you drive people underground that are making art that you don't understand, or that are just making content in general that you don't understand, you're just driving them further underground and further isolating them. And I think that's what we tried the opposite to do in our webcomic community, is we tried to help shine a light on them, to know that like they were understood and that they weren't alone and that they were accepted and that there was like a group for them, and they could express themselves without just being driven further and further and further underground. Because when people are already hurting inside, or just trying to express themselves in general, and you further and further isolate them, you just create kind of like a boiling, sort of a pressurized system with no release valves. And I think all art is important, as long as it's not just like there to be edgy or whatever, like just to like stir shit up, like trolling now. But when I was in webcomics, I don't recall anybody doing art just to troll. I think what ended up happening is the people who were successful ended up not liking their own art that was making them successful, and they wanted to make art that made them happy, but that art wasn't attracting the folks that they wanted to attract. And I don't know. Side note, with the whole Gab thing, I was talking to some Lovecraftian folks, and Gab in and of itself seems to have like a hard time dealing with gore and horror, because it wants to be a Christian site, which is a whole other can of worms, and I don't want to drag that up here. But the point is that you have to be able to digest all kinds of information in all manners of mediums and be able to understand it for what it is and the purposes and intents behind it. So it would cause a lot of people to not overreact because something initially shocks them. Which reminds me, what this ended up reminding me of in a more modern sense is Corpse Party. If you aren't familiar with Corpse Party, that's a Japanese series where a bunch of school kids are stuck in a school and horrible things keep happening. And it's pretty gory and stuff. But it's sort of like, even though you might think it's like gore for gore's sake, it's really just an art style. And it only has to mean something behind it if you read too much into it. And so I reached out to this artist, and they said they're going to kind of put together a little bit how they got into this. And I think that's important because that adds the reason why I asked for that is because that adds like the final piece of context of like, are they doing this art to cope? Are they doing this to reach out? Are they doing this because this is just where their comfort level is and where their design is? Because a lot of this art, if you can help just kind of gently steer them a little bit, you never know like how far in a positive way it could go. They could end up making a video game. They could end up making a book, you know. They could end up helping a lot of people. You never know. Like, I don't know. I've always been of the mind of figuring out where to encourage and then just keep encouraging people. So figure out how far their talent and their drive can take them instead of just compartmentalizing them. And just because you gotta like sometimes put something in a box to kind of understand the frame of reference and the context doesn't mean it has to like just stay stuck in that box. Now that it has a box, it can start to grow. But like you got to put a seed in a pot, but then just because you put a seed in a pot and it starts growing doesn't mean it has to be stuck there forever. So a lot of the prepper community, a lot of the they're misunderstood. Like, you realize that every group that is not part of the mainstream is misunderstood, usually by like every other group. So I guess this is just kind of like a good example of like a cautionary tale of try to understand and try to get some like the historical context. I miss the webcomic thing so bad, and we all had our own websites and we all had our own domains, and millions of hours worth of work is lost forever. And so I guess it was kind of neat to be able to see a little bit of that again. So anyway, you don't have to buy any of their stuff, but I wanted to showcase it anyway and talk about it and share my feelings about it. So yeah. All right. Intermission before I wrap this up. There was the theme of this episode was supposed to be don't judge a book by its cover. And the reason for that, and by the way, there's a bunch of things I'm trying to remember, so I'm not affiliated with Broken Roads or that art page. I just try to do community spotlights every couple episodes. I wish everyone would do that, because a lot of folks, they ask for help, but if there isn't cross-pollination, none of us have any resources to help each other. So if you ever before you ever ask for help, make sure that you're helping others. So that's why I keep doing the community spotlights. The theme of this episode was supposed to be don't judge a book by its cover, and the reason why for that, so the Purge franchise is officially 10 years old, and I couldn't have been like more disgusted with the content at the time. I feel like this is the context that I forgot to add that wraps this episode up. There was a lot of what I would categorize the content as torture porn in the early to mid aughts, as they're called. When not like The Grudge and the not all of those. I mean the ones where every single movie just seemed to be an excuse, just for torture, and there were a lot of them. And I very distinctly remember it feeling like, to me, that was the beginning of the end, when they were rolling out tons and tons and tons and tons of movies where the sole focus of the movie seemed to just be like mutilation for shock value's sake, and torture, and a lot of just sexual violence, and just violence in general, just for the sake of violence. And I don't even remember all of them now. I just remember there being a ton, and they had just overwhelmed like the movie scene. And this was actually before Saw and before the Purge franchise. Both the Saw and the Purge franchises had ended up with a lot of commercial success, and that was the words that I was trying to remember earlier for webcomics. Like, almost none of them found commercial success, like 0.01%, where the rest of them sadly fell by the wayside, despite many of them being significantly better. But when you have more of a reach, you can just copy everybody else's work, or just say what everyone's already saying, and end up with another Big Bang Theory, which is just, in my opinion, just the bottom of the pit of pandering garbage. And so Saw, disgusted me at first. I thought it was horrible. I thought it was barbaric. But then as the series carried on, I realized that really what it was kind of like an avenue, or kind of like an entirely new genre of shows and movies about escaping traps, right? And then I realized, okay, there's something more to this. They're not just torturing people. These are about traps and trap makers, and curious as the trap maker's art, not watching what his own traps end up doing. But I don't have to go back and watch Saw. But from Saw, now there's just tons and tons of trap rooms, and tons of other trap movies, and prison escape movies and stuff, and I get it. I don't have to go back and watch it, but I get it. Purge, very much the same way. The thought in 2013 that society could have devolved that fast into needing a purge, it was horrifying to me. It was disgusting. It was repulsive. And then, to make matters worse, the first movie was a very, very subdued, just home invasion movie. Like, they really screwed the pooch, and I still don't understand how they got a second movie greenlit from that, unless somebody, or they just managed to make enough money, or there was just enough of people who saw the writing on the wall. And then the second movie is obviously amazing, and then the rest is history. And I was watching Purge 2 last night, and it takes place, ironically, Purge 2 takes place this year. They were not, actually, if anything, the Purge series was not only way ahead of its time, but it forecasted things like way further out than they actually were. I think Purge scared me because I wasn't ready, right? And if I had judged it by its cover and not given it the merits that it deserved and the accolades for how disturbingly close and accurate it was, there ended up being real purges. Like, every night ended up being like the purge there for a while. It was like 100-night purge with no cops and no laws, and in a lot of ways the cities are still like that. And Scream was the other one. They tried to do a new Scream in New York, and it's like, New York's already worse than a Scream movie. And so there's a lot you can do to prepare, though. One of the things I forgot to say earlier as I listened through this is you can still be composting all through the winter. There's so many different practices and drills, and you can be working on your exercise and health. But I just want to say, like, don't judge a book by its cover. The pro 2A community, they can seem weird sometimes. They don't all get along. Nobody has the same ideas of how to prepare bugging in versus bugging out. It's okay to be immediately repulsed and reject things, and you don't have to understand and absorb everything, because if it's too much negativity, you shouldn't absorb it, especially like the transference of negative energy. But the whole point of my books is that you're gonna, like, true coexistence, like true equity. They're trying to, the left is trying to push its own versions of these things, these perverted versions of, like, really, when they say these things, really what they're saying is make everybody else as low as possible to try to lift them up, and then your equity ends up being like the lowest form of existence. Whereas we can all find not middle ground but common ground to survive, and understand that we have our own communities that we need to be helping, right? And I have a really hard time explaining that, because homelessness isn't like an us versus them. If it's your own local community of your own actual people that are now disenfranchised because of quote unquote equity, which is really just the redistribution of wealth and the redistribution of resources, which can happen to any of us. And also the redistribution of just making an area too expensive to live in for everybody, which is called gentrification, which could land all of us in a homeless situation, which could land all of us into a migrant situation. Sorry, I keep adding things. The distinction here revolves around people that are homeless in your area because they got kicked out of the houses in your area, versus the homeless that have been bused or flown in, sometimes now 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So then you end up being like the final destination that you don't have any time, resources, energy to distribute them there anymore. So it ends up being like a big landing place, unfortunately, where the big cities are exhausted and they've started farming out to the rural towns. This also isn't a United States only thing. Europe specifically has farmed out these migrant communities to towns where in many cases the migrant community is larger than the town itself, where it's mathematically and financially impossible. So there's lots of different lots of different kind of situations to not everyone's in exactly the same situation, but that's the difference between someone potentially in your own area becoming homeless or being homeless and them being from your area, versus people now homeless but they're from a completely different area and they've been dumped on you. I consider those both different situations. I can talk about those in a future podcast. So I wanted to say that to try to put that into context a little bit. I've been homeless. Sooner or later, if things continue at this rate, we're all going to be homeless. So we have to find reasons to stick together, to find common ground, so we can all move forward together. And there are going to be some elements of society that are not going to be compatible, and I get that. But the whole point of my books, how my books started, is this realization that everyone's going to think they aren't compatible when really we have a lot of aspects that do make us compatible. I know. My cat agrees with me. We have to find reasons to stick and stay together and not turn against each other. Because the folks that are at the most risk tend to also be the most important. The folks with the least amount of risk in their gated communities and their security and typically have like the least to add. They exist to consume and they don't produce anything that anyone is aware of, at least. Unless they're doctors, in which case then whatever. But don't pretend like any of us actually have access to doctors that much anymore. With them being months out to sea and insurance is getting worse. So, go outside and look to your left and look to your right. And that's your group right there. Regardless if they're low income or not low income, if they have solar panels or don't. That's going to be your group, because when the shit hits the fan and the mob's marching down the street, that's all you've got. So, don't judge a book by its cover. But also I'm working on my book covers, but that's a different. What my dad used to say, like, things usually aren't urgent until somebody's like standing in the street, and then you got to get them out of the street so they don't get hit by a car. And just be aware, be careful. Don't shit on your fellow. Don't shit on your neighbors. Don't shit where you eat. Don't go looking for problems. Don't go looking for fights, and just focus on trying to be left alone. And look for those local opportunities to help people. Because if you help your community, and if you help keep your community squared away, and especially people that are struggling, if those people leave their houses and they're not taking care of their houses anymore, then you could end up with squatters. They're going to be 10,000 times worse and impossible to get rid of. If people just set up camp in your town and you can't get rid of them, you could end up with just massive problems. So stay local, stay squared away, don't look for trouble, and just be a good person and help, get stuff off a shelf if somebody can't reach it. Bring your shopping cart back to the store if you can. I don't know. Try to be left alone. Just try to stay being a good person. And so with that, I'll wrap the show up. So that is the end of the show, and thanks for sticking with me and kind of floating and flying around on all these tangents. And I appreciate y'all, and don't forget to resist the time tyranny of them trying to make us change all of our clocks and being time deniers. And if you appreciated all this, check out my Coffee page. I write apocalypse fiction. Yeah, talk about being misunderstood, right? I guess I'll wrap it up with this. Like, so many people forget how bad it could be, and they always wait until it gets bad, and then they're out of good choices. Don't wait, and try to encourage everybody else to not wait until there's only bad decisions left to have to make a decision. Because everyone poo-pooed crypto's doing great right now. Like, if you had bought in when crypto was at the bottom, 6-8 months ago, you'd have doubled your money for doing absolutely nothing. This isn't financial advice. I'm just saying, like, it doesn't matter if it's retro video games. it doesn't matter if it's art. Honestly, like, you can make a lot of money flipping art. Don't listen to people who have sat on their hands their entire life and have never made moves, good or bad. Like, you're going to make mistakes. You know, trying to prep and plan and prepare. Like, it's not called, like, you don't need something in the future. You need something now, which means you had to have planned for it in the past. And I don't have any sponsorships, right? I don't have any ads that I know of. Like, I'm just doing this because I believe in it. You know, and I'm not saying people with sponsorships are bad. I think a lot of the preppers that I know with sponsorships use those sponsorships for really, really, really good things. But outside of that teeny tiny circle, you have to be really skeptical as to why people are telling you to do what they're telling you to do. Because everybody else is just sitting on the fence, waiting until there's only bad decisions left. So, be careful who you listen to, and be careful who asks you for help when they have never done anything to help anybody. Because the time to plan and prepare is now. I see the writing on the wall, and it is a ticking clock of when the anarchists decide to come out and ride this latest wave, and the cities are going to be destroyed again. And it's going to coincide with the commercial market collapsing, commercial real estate market collapsing, and the elections. And open borders, massive migration towns, massive homeless towns. The time to plan and prepare is now. Don't go overboard. Don't max out your credit cards. Don't do anything stupid. But try to pay attention. Because this is a recurring system. And the same damn thing happens every single time. And I can't promise that the housing market is going to reset this time. It's not resetting in Canada. So, waiting for houses to crash might not work this time. Or you might wait for them to crash only for everything to switch to FedCoin and it all to get bought up with digital currency. And then your social credit score is too low to be able to buy a house. Like, you don't know. So, I'm going to wrap it up there because I'm losing my voice. But I appreciate you all. And, take care. And buy my books. Bye-bye.